Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Once a DJ. If you'd like to support the show, then head to onceadj.com/support to find out how you can help. If you'd like to get in touch with any feedback or suggestions, email onceadjpodcast@gmail.com. Once a DJ is produced by the good people at Remote Control. If you'd like to find out more about working with them, head to remote-ctrl.co.uk. Time for the show. Once a DJ is brought to you with the support of Vinyl Underground Record Store. Since 1993, VU has been shipping new and used underground house, techno, disco, hip-hop, soul and more worldwide from Northampton in the UK. They're your go-to store for upfront releases, repressed classics and deep digging for undiscovered gems. And they're a great crew to deal with who really care about the music and their customers. To show the support to the Once a DJ community, they're giving you 10% off your next order. Just head to vinylunderground.co.uk and use the code ONCEADJ10 at checkout. You also get free UK delivery on all orders over £100. That's ONCEADJ10 at vinylunderground.co.uk. Welcome back to Once a DJ. We're here with Bulgaria's DJ DelightFull today. He's a 3-time world champion. He's won the IDAs. He's won the DMC online twice. We've got a few different things to get into today, so it's really pertinent timing, and I really appreciate getting you on, Del. How are you doing today?
Doing great, thanks, and glad to be on the platform.
Amazing, thank you. So, I think initially the really interesting thing to get into first of all is the fact that most of the guests that we've had on here have been from Western sort of countries or sort of primarily English speaking countries. So it'd be great to hear some of the it'd be great to hear about growing up in Bulgaria and how you first sort of heard about hip hop. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. And I'm glad you mentioned it in that way, because I think the story I'd like to share is basically the story of how things are in a place like Bulgaria, or also in a place like where I live right now, which is Malaysia, and how that story might be quite different from how things are in places with very long-term established DJ scenes, such as the UK, the US, France, etc. So yeah, I'm from Sofia, Bulgaria, born and raised, and spent my first 18 years there. And I got into hip hop because of my brother's tapes and CDs. I was born in '93. He's 9 years older, and when he was in his teens, access to music in general was still fairly limited, and they didn't really have that much of an idea what's going on in general with the different kinds of scenes, genres, music fields in the world, and they were trying to get whatever they could on pirate tapes and pirate CDs. And the situation was, to a certain extent, similar even for me as a young kid. Started listening to these tapes and CDs when I was 7, but we're talking already about the year 2000. But throughout the last several years, I've come to sort of understand that the year 2000 really looked very differently in different places. And some people who are just maybe one generation older than me, who are DJs and I've talked with, reminisce of that time as the early internet, hip-hop and vinyl culture being alive and kicking, but at the same time, things like chat rooms and forums and downloading music as well already being a thing. Whereas I didn't have a computer at home. We had a stereo. And I say pirate tapes and CDs because in that little collection I'll talk about in a second, there were just several maybe original CDs with the 4 or 8 page folds. And even as a little kid, I just knew that these were double or triple the price. And that's why we had mostly the pirate stuff. Yeah, that was an eclectic collection of some 90s classic hip-hop, 36 Chambers, Hieroglyphics, Mos Def, but also Red Hot Chili Peppers' first 3 albums, Offspring, Nirvana, Metallica, a couple of Maiden tapes, but I didn't like Maiden at the time. And Prodigy and Chemical Brothers was also something I liked a lot. And there was an Orbito CD, the electronica act.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because a lot of the other sort of things you've mentioned sound quite kind of soundtrack to that era in skateboarding, for example. Was there much of a skating scene in Sofia?
Yeah, there definitely was. I think strictly in terms of early generations of hip-hop artists, they came entirely from a hip-hop background, and the skating scene was separate. But maybe around the time I'm already talking about, things were merged to a certain extent, because also the hip-hop wear for us, and even for those slightly older than me, pretty much was skate wear. We were wearing, if we could afford them, skate sneakers and the saggy pants, and pretty much the 90s New York skate scene fashion in a way.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of crossover there. So, were there record shops? And I apologise if I sound really ignorant. I don't know anything really about Bulgaria, sort of whether it was a wealthy country or not. Because was it previously part of the USSR?
No, but it was behind the Iron Curtain. It was one of the satellite republics, as they called them. So, yes, it was a communist country until 89.
So, in terms of like getting records over there, were there record shops in the city? Because is Sofia the sorry if I pronounced it wrong. Is it the capital?
Yeah, that's the capital city of the country. Yes. We didn't have, we in my family, we didn't have a turntable at home. I think there was a broken one because they produced cheap turntables in Soviet times, and my grandpa had one, and he had some of the records of the only label that was making records in communist times, which was obviously a state-owned company. But as far as like collecting records as a DJ, there were very, very few people who do that. And I had no idea who these people were or where they played or even what they played until I was maybe 17 or 18. So getting into hip hop because of these tapes and CDs, I had absolutely no idea about records or anything like that.
Did your brother stay into the music then, or did he kind of leave it and kind of go off and get into, get a job and forget about a passion for music or anything like that?
Oh, he was always just a fan. I don't think, unless it's a thing, and he never told me, but I doubt that. I don't think he ever thought about making music or having any job in the music industry, since, to say the least, there is no music industry per se in Bulgaria at all, I would say. But yeah, he was always just a fan, and then he went on to study something else and have a career in it. So he doesn't do music. There's nobody with music background in my family at all.
So how do you then kind of get the aspiration or the ambition to want to become a DJ?
Fast forward a few years later, I'm already in high school, and we basically started going out when we were 13. Actually, the first ever rap concert I went to, I begged my parents to let me go, and it was Das FX, and I was not yet 13, I was 12, and that's quite a memory. It was a bit shocking as well, but I was so hyped, and just to think that I've been a 12-year-old kid is kind of ridiculous, really. But yeah, going out as in clubbing, I guess, was a thing for most of us as young as 14. And at the time, you could still do that in clubs in Sofia, at least some. And my parents would always let me go if I described the event as a concert. So, hey, here's a ticket, and this is a guest artist, and, I'm sort of going to a concert. They wouldn't just, if I described it as clubbing, really a clubbing, then they surely wouldn't let me go. And I'm quite happy about that, because they were liberal, but they were also strict when they had to. And knowing how things went really left for some people my age, I'm very glad about that. But yeah, back to the story.
Can you expand on that?
Yes. So Oh man, we were drinking and smoking as teenagers easily, and that stuff was way more accessible than it should have. And especially looking back, I'm so happy to see that things aren't really exactly the same right now. Not that bad, but I was junior high, as they call it in the States, and the weed spot was next to the school, and the police station was 2 blocks away. And you're 14 years old, and you already have this piece of information that drug dealers and police work together. This is the kind of reality you have in Bulgaria. Because you know that they're gonna circle with the car around the park trying to catch some kids with half a gram or 1 joint, but they'd be never there when a guy is selling weed to kids. You know what I mean? But it's pretty bad also with other substances, and I was not in that crowd because I just had enough brains to not be in it. But that there was basically substance abuse amongst friends of my friends when we were 14, 15, 16. So that was part of the culture and the anti-culture, if I can call it that.
Yeah. No, and, appreciate you sharing that.
And that was happening in clubs too, and it was kind of wild. It was kind of wild, really. But I managed to stay away from it, I guess, to a very reasonable extent, and I was still having fun and finding out music I liked through going to these events. And basically, the biggest subculture at the time was drum and bass. And I never liked the heavy aggressive sound, but there were some liquid drum and bass artists coming to perform in Sofia, and also jungle, which I liked and still like. And I was to a certain extent a part of that crowd, and I was going to these events, and because of that I knew people who were fans of it. And the first people I ever heard thought about buying the cheapest controller they can get a hold of were people who got into it because of drum and bass. But I was a hip-hop head this entire time. There was just no hip-hop parties except for concerts to go to at all. The first time it crossed my mind that maybe this is not rocket science and that maybe I could try if I figure out what I need was when some of my friends started buying the cheapest DJ gear they could and even using it at some flat parties and stuff like that, mixing some house or some drum and bass for the crowd of 15 of us having a party at someone's flat where their parents are away. And that's the first time I actually started looking into what is the actual gear on which the scratching I hear in my favorite hip-hop is being performed on, because I really had no idea. I was already a fan of a whole lot of 90s, late 80s, and all those hip-hop. And I always liked the scratching, but I guess around that time, and I'm already 16, 17, around that time, I begin to think that there should be some connection between this little cheap plastic controller and what these hip-hop DJs do to make these scratches, you know what I mean? But yeah, the level of ignorance is 100%.
But like you say, when you've not got a lot of internet access, like with the internet, it increases your rate of learning things exponentially. So without that, it's such an arduous, difficult sort of task to pick up this information.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess I jumped a little bit from when I was a 7-year-old kid listening to my brother's tapes to when I was 16, because I think I was 13 when I first had a PC at home with internet connection. And this is a big reason why I stopped watching J-Lo and Ja Rule videos on MTV and VH1 and started downloading Naughty by Nature and Hieroglyphics albums. And it just instantly clicked. Oh, snap, this is kind of better than what I see on TV, you know what I mean? I like it more. It's absolutely insanely good. So yeah, by the time I'm talking already high school friends buying little DJ controllers to mix on, I had internet access. And I think it was this interest that they sparked that led me to just Google DJ stuff, and then subsequently stumbling upon DJ battles and classic DMC footage and Return of the DJ Volume 1, etc., etc. Already became a huge Idea and Abilities fan and also a Jurassic 5 fan. And the DJ component in these acts is super strong. Dilated Peoples as well. Super major influence that cuts on these Dilated albums. To this day, I would say. Yeah, then I slowly started connecting the dots. It's kind of hard to recall the whole story, but I clearly remember people started talking about buying a controller, and me started thinking, what is this equipment? What does it do? What does it have to do with that other equipment? Oh, cool, that they're using turntables, but then there is a mixer. And then use the mixer and turntable, to perform scratches. It was literally figuring it out piece by piece. But by the time I started thinking about buying a setup, I was 17 or even 18, but I think 17. And I remember not only that I learned scratching with DJ Angelo's tutorials, but I remember that I had watched them before I had a setup because they were already on YouTube. I think maybe just released around the time. So I was 17 in 2011.
So did you start them learning on a controller?
Not really. I was trying to ask around exactly these type of people who were into the whole electronic scene and knew about controllers. And they were telling me that it's a good entry point, but I wasn't seeing anybody actually scratching on a controller. And by the time I understood that, at the time I understood it this way, that you need turntables and a mixer to do scratching. So they're telling me that a controller is a good entry point, but I wasn't believing them. And at the time I remember the numbers were something like, you can get a hold of one for about £200, and that was a lot of pocket money to save for me. Fast forward, I started saving, and it's exactly one of those friends who got into drum and bass DJing and production as well, who was following some adverts in a forum for secondhand equipment that I didn't know. He saw an advert for a pair of Stanton T60s for, talking in British pounds again, about £130 for both with needles and cartridges. And that was rather accessible, and I was already in the 12th grade. That's the last year of school. And I bought these with pocket money savings, but had no mixer. So for the first 2 weeks, I had to start researching what's the cheapest mixer I can get to start doing scratching. And I've already implied it, but to say it clearly, I wanted to learn to scratch. Didn't want to learn to DJ. Wanted to learn to scratch. My buddy who found the advert for these decks lent me a super trash cheap Behringer mixer. Or do you call it Behringer? And that's the first setup I had. I hooked it to the stereo that we still had at home. The same one I was talking about when I listened to these tapes and CDs 10 years earlier. And that's that. And then the next thing is that I didn't have records. So I pulled out, first I remember I pulled out some of my grandfather's records, which were Pirate Beatles and some local pop music from 70s and 80s pop from communist time in Bulgaria, just to see what it's like to move your hand on these. And another really cool thing I remember is that, very strange coincidence, but the job that my mom had at the time, her colleague was doing the audio work for that company, and this same guy is one of the biggest diggers and collectors in Bulgaria. And this guy was the whole time discouraging me from buying turntables. And he's saying, don't, but he's not into scratching. He's one of those diggers who, on the down low, hate scratching, but will never say it. We've all met them, I think. There are diggers who hate scratching to the bottom of their heart. I don't know if it's because they can't do it or they literally hate the sound.
They could even view it as just abuse of records.
It could as well be, but that's why we have scratch tools. Anyway, he was discouraging me from doing that. But when he learned that I did buy turntables and I already had this mixer, he asked my mom for my number and he called me and he was super happy on the phone. And he said, so didn't I tell you not to do that? And I can hear him smiling on the phone. And I say, yeah, but I wanted to do that. So I did that. And here I am in my room and there are 2 turntables here. Okay, listen, I'll just give you 2 boxes of stuff and you try to do stuff with it, okay? And then the next day, my mom came back with 2 boxes of records, and those were my first grades. And he didn't give it to me. He borrowed it, but lent, and I had to give it back. But that was a life-changing moment, also because of what was in these boxes.
That was going to be my next question.
Mostly compilations. So there were some BB comps. There was the Mr. Thing, Strange Games and Mr. Thing Volume 2. There was the DJ Spin a Disco one, Strange Games and Funky Things. There were some Masters at Work compilations. That was my entry to J Dilla and Slum Village because To You For You was on there. Some fun compilations with some classic party bangers or famous sampled material. 24 Karat Gold, Ghetto Misfortune 12 sticks in my mind right away. That kind of stuff.
Once a DJ is brought to you with the support of Vinyl Underground Record Store. Since 1993, VU's been shipping new and used underground house, techno, disco, hip-hop, soul and more worldwide from Northampton in the UK. They're your go-to store for upfront releases, repressed classics and deep digging for undiscovered gems. And they're a great crew to deal with who really care about the music and their customers. To show the support to the Once a DJ community, they're giving you 10% off your next order. Just head to vinylunderground.co.uk and use the code ONCEADJ10 at checkout. You also get free UK delivery on all orders over £100. That's ONCEADJ10 at vinylunderground.co.uk. I wanted to create a product for the listeners to be able to support the show and for the guests as a token of gratitude for being on, so I've teamed up with Sure Shot Shop to create some Once a DJ 45 RPM adapter clamps. These are my weapon of choice as a 45 adapter as they add stability and grip to aid you in any setup. These are available for £25 each plus flat fee postage from onceadj.bigcartel.com, and if you'd like to see the other models you can buy and also customise, check out sureshotshop.com. There's kind of parallels in certain ways between my entry into it and yours, because for me it was wanting to learn to scratch. I was making my little beats and I wanted to learn to scratch on them. It was very much, Jurassic 5, Dilated People, Shout Out Babu, Cut Chemist. So I just got one turntable to start with and I just learned to scratch. Because you had 2, were you mixing as well, or were you very much purely just having those on and scratching on top of them?
This is something that is not so clear in my memory, man, to be fair, but I think I got into it with the idea to learn to scratch, but as soon as I got these 2 boxes of records, it just somehow sparked my interest to mix, I suppose. But I remember by the time, and we'll get to that, but then I went to study in the UK, and a little later on I brought my setup to the UK and bought a new mixer in the UK. By the time I was practicing in the kitchen of my student dorm, I was already trying to scratch and mix on records.
So is that the next sort of key place in the journey then, coming to the UK?
Yeah, I suppose, because so here's another thing that I haven't talked about in interviews, but being in the UK and chatting with people, I realized that they don't have a clear idea about this. But I went to study in Edinburgh in Scotland, and I'm not exactly sure what the deal is right now post-Brexit, but the Scottish government allowed EU citizens, except for English people, to study for free. That was the main reason I ended up there. So when I was in the 12th grade, I wasn't particularly happy with how life is around me, what's happening around me, where music is going, what's trendy in music, and just, I don't know, I never wanted to exaggerate it, but also I guess I shouldn't be downplaying it, but I think I was in my teenage depression period pretty hard, and I really just wanted to get a new start. And I had a very, very clear idea that going into university in Bulgaria or getting a job in a store or in a bar in Bulgaria is not a new start at all, as far as what was bothering me deep inside is concerned. And that's why I started looking into studying in another country. And I depended on my parents to support me for that, for which I'm super thankful, although budget was super tight. But yeah, I could study in the UK because I didn't have to have a loan or pay these absolutely exuberant fees for universities in England. I had no fees to study in Edinburgh. And that's how I ended up there. That was September 2012.
What was it like as a student city then? Because I was there a few months ago with my family, and it's such a beautiful place.
Absolutely, it is. It's almost like a fairy tale city with this volcano hill, and then this other hill with these Greek structures, and the third hill has a medieval castle on top. It's like, oh, you can't make this up. I mean, I was very mesmerized by architecture and all the culture happening around me. But at the same time, I guess somehow ignorantly, I was expecting to see a little bit more of what I'm seeing in hip hop documentaries. And that wasn't around so much. And as I was staying a little longer, I came to understand another very interesting aspect, which is that especially when it comes to kids being into hip hop or any subculture, most of them didn't have a chance to study in these universities in their own city. And it was a complete divide. You were either the student crowd or you were one of the local people who have nothing to do with that. See, even in terms of going out and clubbing, you'd go into some of these clubs on Calais, which is the party street, and it'd be basically only students.
So did you manage then to kind of ingratiate yourself into the hip-hop community at all while you were there?
I wouldn't say so. It took a while, and I remember some people who showed interest in what I do, for which in retrospect I'm thankful, like DJ Fusion and his brand of events, Pass the Vibes, shout outs, one of the people holding it down for hip-hop culture locally. So to begin with, I was a super beginner, right? I had no idea about a lot of stuff. Also, I didn't have Serato and I didn't have many records, as I was just, again, saving on pocket money and slowly building crates. But we're talking February, I have 70 records, and then April, I have 90, and I'm happy. You know what I mean? You can't rock a party with 90 records, half of which are not even anything you would play at a party. So I wasn't even thinking of playing gigs there. I was maybe thinking of finding people who scratch, but I couldn't find them. And it's kind of funny because now that I've traveled so much and I've been to so many places, not only the internet looks different than it looked 12 years ago, but also just the idea that you should find people and randomly hit people and maybe they would want to hang out, they would want to meet you, was not the mindset I had. I guess I was a bit shy about stuff like that. So I saw some DJ names and I heard some cuts on Scottish hip hop and I saw the people who were doing them, but it's not like I just texted them on Facebook or anything. I wasn't social and confident like that. I was just practicing in my student dorm the first year, and that's it.
Did you get to do some parties then after that first year?
Let me remember though. So I was in Edinburgh 2012, 13, 14. Then third year of my studies, I got the Erasmus scholarship and I went to another country to study. And I came back for my graduation year. In my graduation year, I had a little residency in a nice little cocktail bar that wanted to keep it 100% hip hop. So that was my only kind of presence on the local scene. But yeah, first 2 years, not really. I remember doing one night around the end of my second year in uni at the student union. You know, every university in the UK has these. I don't know if people listening from other countries, they have that. In Bulgaria, we don't have it. Like an event space connected to your university campus type of thing. But yeah, as I said, I already linked with a few people like this guy, Rolf, DJ Fusion. And they had the regular hip-hop night, but on Tuesdays. And I think I went a couple of times. It was generally also expensive for me to go clubbing because there's always entry. And I'm on a tight student budget and drinks are expensive. And the people I know in uni aren't into hip-hop at all. So I was still very disconnected from that whole thing.
Is it fair to say then, I would imagine, and I may be wrong on this, that you get quite a lot of wealthy students up at Edinburgh with it being a prestigious university as well?
Definitely. And still, I think there are various different groups of people and maybe lots of divides that I wasn't realizing and I would see differently now, but obviously now I'm not a student. And we all knew that people coming from China and Far East Asia and people coming from the States must be from wealthy families because the taxes that they had to pay and not being eligible for loans in the UK for these student fees were absolutely mental. Talking about like 40,000 quid a year or 30,000 quid a year. So there was definitely that. There were local Scottish students, but I know that Scottish universities have quotas, actually. And it's not hidden info, but it's not super also vocal sort of thing. But they had quotas for how many percent. I don't know if it's number or percentage, doesn't matter. But there were local students too, but definitely not the kind of people that were quote unquote in the hood doing skating, hip hop, or electronic music or whatever else it is. And as far as clubbing, I think definitely with clubbing, crowds mixed up a lot. I mean student crowds, so people from various different backgrounds. The way venues were in Edinburgh, it wasn't a posh vibe or anything like that. But it's just that I was on a really tight budget, so I couldn't go out regularly.
So where did you go to then after you'd graduated?
So that was 2016, and right after finishing dissertation and all of my exams, I went to volunteer at the refugee camp in Calais for 2 months, which is a big part of the story, although it has nothing to do with DJing. But that was peak of the so-called migrant crisis in Europe. And at the time, that was a camp still considered illegal by the French government, frequently abused by French police and special forces as well. And it had about 6,500 people in it, living in makeshift shelters, huts, some caravans, but not many. So I think, in a way, if I have to, I can talk a lot about that, but just to link it to the DJ story, basically, I think it gave me this perspective that, and I still have it to this day to a certain extent, and it's a bit pathetic to talk about the DJ struggle when you've seen the real struggle. You know what I mean? And I know a lot of people who listen to that might disagree to a certain degree, but I saw people who suffer for no other reason other than where they happen to have been born. Literally no other reason. And I always knew that whatever I'm going through with music or, you know, not being from a rich family in Bulgaria is still absolutely nothing compared to what I'm seeing in front of my eyes with people I'm trying to help with this NGO I was working for, volunteering for. So that has definitely informed the whole journey for sure. And right after that, went back to Edinburgh for the graduation ceremony, and summertime started looking for a job, went back to my parents' home, and then I found a teaching job in China, and I went to live and work in China, which is also where I got certified as a teacher of English language as a second language. And I was working in a private school in China for about 2 years.
Wow. So were you in one of the big cities?
Last time I checked, it was the 22nd by population.
Right.
So most people would say this is proper provincial China. And I was really throwing myself in the deep. But to give the idea of it, it's a city of about 3 million people with 8 metro lines and 8 huge bridges above a massive river and 2 different skyscraper neighborhoods, financial cities, whatever you want to call them.
Right. How is it for hip hop?
Even quieter and deader than Bulgaria. There were some kids who were trying to imitate the hot trap rappers at the time, and this is between 2016 and 2018. As far as scratching, the nearest person I found to have a scratch setup was in a city that was several hundred kilometers away. Yeah, again, this whole journey from high school years until the end of China is basically me being super peripheral to everything, watching stuff online and practicing in my first the kitchen, the student dorm kitchen, then my room in the next place I was renting in Edinburgh, and then the little apartment I had for myself for the first time in China.
Did you have your decks in China?
No, I sold them. I sold them in Edinburgh, and in China, I was struggling. I thought it wouldn't be difficult, but I was struggling to find decks. And I was trying to ask around, trying to look whatever secondhand markets they have. And it was just massively overpriced techniques. And I ended up buying a pair of techniques from Japan. And they got delayed by Chinese customs with about a month and a half. And then they had 25% customs tax on top of the price. Yeah, so here's another thing to mention, basically, between the beginning of the whole thing and the Chinese episodes of the saga, I had several different periods of time in which I couldn't have a setup at home. Like the first 6 years of learning and doing DJing, I had the total probably for a year and a half without a setup available at my place.
Because this is what I'm thinking. What year was your first World Championship?
2020.
Yeah. So we're on 2017 now. And so you've not got a lot of time to achieve world champion level, sort of considering that you've been without your decks quite a lot. So when you left China, this was where did you go then? And is that when you got fully immersed?
Yeah, this is basically where the real story begins, because in China, I created my Instagram page and I already had enough confidence, I guess, to know that if I just hashtag a couple of things, then even if it won't be thousands of people, it will be some people from across the globe seeing what I upload. That was still a scary moment to me at the time. But I did that, and it started getting some attention, and it started catching the attention of some hip-hop artists back home. And that's where I realized, shit, I've been away for a while, and I still want to do that. And now I slowly began to think that I could be somebody in this. So it took that long, literally. And I started being in touch online with some of these people that later on I collabed with or warmed up for in Sofia. And by the time I left China, I was heading back to Bulgaria with the clear intention of putting it down for the local scene and trying to be somebody on the local hip-hop scene. And that's when I started practicing more, and that's when I just switched to a different lifestyle, because it wasn't a full-time student or a full-time job anymore to do alongside DJing. I started teaching English on the side, but online, and pretty much started working for myself, still teaching kids in China. And the plan was this, to allow me to have enough time to practice heavily and try to run stuff in Bulgaria.
Was that quite good then? Because I sometimes work with people in different parts of the world, and sometimes the time differences can be really beneficial and helpful. What is the time difference? It's about 5-6 hours?
Bulgaria and China is 6 hours, or 5 depending on daylight saving.
So would that have been quite useful, and were you teaching them after school?
Yeah, so when I'm in Europe, the schedule was noon, early afternoon classes.
Yeah. Oh, nice. So then after that, you've kind of got all day to practice. So did you find then that your kind of your skills kind of like rapidly just rocketed up then?
I think so. That was the first time I saw that properly putting the work in really results in becoming better by the day. And that motivated me even more and more. And actually, the first time I entered any international competition was the 18? So I got a wild card for the IDA scratch category, but I didn't understand that this is really high-tech stuff and your little quirky ideas have no business there. Like, it is what it is, this category. This is where you don't just shred, you shred more violently than a grizzly bear, or you don't even make it to the semifinals. I didn't fully understand that, but yeah, that was the first thing I ever entered, and I was super motivated for that. And after I submitted my video, and it involves not freestyle scratching, but I'm changing a few different records, and I'm using some melodic samples also. And out of the blue, Miyajima from Japan hit me up, and he said, his English is not so good, but he said something along the lines of, I like your idea of changing many records for this kind of battle. And I think that was the first time somebody of that caliber entered my inbox, and I totally flipped. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. Wow. And I think it was very soon after that I also entered the Scratch Bastard Calm Down Challenge. And unexpectedly for me, I ended up top 10 in that. And then from then on, it was just straight up motivation to do more and more. But as I'm saying, yeah, this is the real beginning of the story. And this is when I slowly began to see myself as an artist and as a performer. And while practicing a lot and entering these online things, I was trying to run stuff in Sofia, but that part didn't go so well at all. And here comes this part of the story, which led fast forward to my decision last month to quit. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I spent 1 year in Sofia. So in the most basic terms, the reality is this. There's no club events with anything I would consider alternative music. Basically none. Except for if it's rap artists who have gained an audience for doing quality and intelligent hip hop, and they do concerts and they gather this crowd. In terms of DJing, there's nothing remotely like a hip hop party where you would hear anything else than the current radio hits or bling era rap. In terms of, I don't know, even a venue that can hold 200 people and somebody digging for funk and soul will come and rock the spot, that was also not a thing. So the DJ scene basically is clubs that are, to oversimplify a bit, but to give you the better picture, pop clubs and bars. So bars are not really event spaces in usual sense of the word to me. They usually have people who like the spot for the drinks, for the bartenders, for the location, etc. And the struggle was to try to play gigs in these bars, or whichever of these bars cater to, loosely speaking, hip-hop, break, soul funk, Latin, breakbeat, etc. And we're talking about gigs that pay about, depending on who you are, I guess between 60 and 100 pounds.
So not make a living off it money?
No, not at all. And I had a very clear idea that me being, at the time, I'm not sure I can say the best scratcher, but one of the best scratchers in the country, easily, does not mean that I'll get gig opportunities. I never had this idea that because I win something, I'll get gigs or whatever. It's because I already had enough understanding to know that it doesn't work like that. But I had this idea that I'm offering something that other people don't do. and I will try to run it independently in small places. And the key moment to that is to have somebody give me a regular night. And that was the real struggle. So at the time, just in this span of 1 year, I'm still teaching part-time. I'm still practicing like a madman, entering battles. And at the same time, I'm trying to run 4 or 5 different things. One was a night called We Both Speak with Our Hands in Dangerous Ways, in which I wanted to be me and one guest DJ who has some skill level, and to do functional hip-hop parties, but with the scratch element involved. Took a while until I find a spot that is willing to give me this opportunity at all. Then from the time they said yes to the time that they actually gave me a date, took another 2 months. And that was already, I think, February or March. Then the second one was a month later. Then they made a break for no apparent reason at all. Then the third time they gave me a date was a holiday and nobody came. And then was the summer break, and most of these bars are closed in summer because everybody is either working, but the city is empty, or everybody who can afford to have a holiday go to the seaside or abroad. So these bars shut down, and after the summer, they just didn't give me another date anymore. So that was through the window. Another one started, I think, after the summer, and I called it Move with the Groove. And that was no hip hop at all, in a slightly posher place, strictly funk soul. And I was also playing in that particular spot some disco, some salsa and samba, bit more multi-genre, but still basically on the 60s, 70s tip. That was kind of a similar struggle. I had to always fight for this thing to be regular, and it was still paid in a similar way, super modestly. And in the end, they also just kind of shut it for no reason. So that was the second thing I was trying to run. The third thing is that I was in a crew at the time called the Innkeepers, and they were 2 producers, one working purely analog, chopping records and making beats on an MPC. The main mastermind of the whole project, who was doing live finger drumming, and he was producing on various kinds of gear and playing a synth. And later on, we were also joined by a musician who played synths and bass. So sound became really organic. We were doing it all live without metronome or anything, just live beats with live bass, live synths. And I'm either scratching or throwing scratch hooks or throwing acapellas on top. So we make live remixes of stuff. That was going well, but again, for 4 people, some of the venues, man, we had to bring our own table to fit the setup. So it's not you're bringing your own setup, you do your own promo, you do your own event cover, you do your own stickers and flyers and whatever, and you still don't get paid much. Sometimes it was bring your own fucking table.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
I remember I was living on the periphery of the city center of Sofia, and I had one of those IKEA tables with the legs that can screw in and out, and then it's just a big plank. So it was a 3.5 meter plank that we carried on foot from my spot to the venue. It was about a 25-minute walk, but the enthusiasm was strong, and that was the only thing which I felt people were supporting and our friends were supporting too, and was going well. Still a struggle because nobody wanted us to perform this regularly, but I was trying to get dates in different spots so that we keep it a monthly thing, even if this month is one time here, next month is one time there, next time is at the third spot. I think we did 5 or 6 of these, 5 or 6 different spots. At one point I was so exhausted because I was doing everything I'm telling you I was doing, and I was handling all the organizational work, all the money talk, which I'm actually not very good at, for the entire project. And I had the longest travel to where we were rehearsing, and I don't drive, so I was just catching the bus to get there. And then I started getting pissed off that I saw myself as kind of the weak link, the most enthusiasm, but there are these guys who can actually make music. I don't produce. And then there's this guy who actually graduated from a music school at a music university. And now he's playing the bass with us, doing beats. And what am I doing? I'm only a semi-proficient scratcher who doesn't even make music. So I was seeing myself as musically the weak link in the project, but I was coming up with some tune ideas. I was coming up with hooks. I was practicing much more than they did. And I started getting pissed off that they were a little slack at rehearsals. And at one point I just said, look, it's kind of getting tired and annoyed, and I'll just let you guys organize the next month event. And we'll rehearse and we'll go and do it. And then they didn't do it and I left the crew. So I don't think I acted in the best way possible, probably looking in hindsight. But then that was basically the third thing that fell through from everything I was trying to run. And I can go on and on. I think it was 5 or 6 different things that I was trying to reach a certain level of success with so that I can be heard, like they say in hip hop. I want to be heard. Please listen to my demo type of thing. And all of it was going nowhere. And I was getting some passive aggressive vibes from other scratchers, just trying to, at the time I felt, bring me down to their level by just acting as if I wasn't getting better. You know what I mean? As if it's not anything like an objective level of technicality and creativity, but that I can't too quickly say I'm doing well, or that I want some stuff online or placed at some stuff online. That doesn't mean much. It's like, yeah, I know it doesn't mean much, but so what did you do? You know what I mean? And I wasn't feeling it at all with the local scratch crowd, and it started getting heavy mentally. And at the time, I started this beautiful relationship with my girlfriend that is in the other room right now. And I've been super happy to share my life with for the past 5 years. But it was a long distance relationship because she was studying in Vienna. And after 1 year in Sofia, I just decided to fuck off. It's like this is so bad that it's almost like I can't call my city home. I don't feel welcome.
Yeah, I think what can be tough though as well, I've seen it with the small communities over here at different times. Sometimes you'll get different people in a small place that are trying to do things, and instead of kind of working with each other to lift them up, they kind of see each other as competition, or someone will say something silly and then people fall out, and you just end up with not much of a community compared to what should be there. And it can be really weird because you're just thinking, we all just want something to work here. And if you're the person that's working really hard on it, it totally makes sense that that's going to really exhaust you, sort of mentally as well as physically.
Yeah, and, I was younger, surely less mature. I wasn't innocent all the way through. But what was for sure that I was trying to run stuff with best of intentions, really. And it just didn't work, like none of it. Some people that still keep in touch with me have good memories from some of these events and try to big me up saying, you did some nice stuff, man. But it was so small and with so much difficulties and with so much unwillingness to just give me the trust to do it often at their venue, these people with the venues, that it was too much. It was too much. And so then I left for Vienna and just went to live in Vienna with my girlfriend.
Oh, you've been to a lot of places. How was Vienna?
I went and pandemic came 3 months later. So that was the battle period. That's pandemic hit, we started staying home, and I started winning stuff. Started winning the Vect Noob Supremacy Scratch, Vect Noob Supremacy Juggling, Vect Flip for Flop 1, Cut to Cut, DMC Foundation next year, 2021. Entered all the MC categories when they built the numerous categories, placed top 10 in every, did IDA both years and placed 5th and 6th respectively. Pretty much top 10 every world final.
What was the experience like? Because I know Vect runs the battles, and shout out to him. He was the second guest on here, shared some incredible stuff, really honest guy.
I listened to it, yeah.
Really nice guy. What was the experience of going through his battles? Because I know he's someone that is a lot about feedback, about very honest feedback. Did you get a lot of that from him?
100%. So part of the battle prizes for each of the battles he did was a free Skype session with him. And first time I had this session, it's almost like everything changed again. Just like in 2018, going from China to Bulgaria, something started to click. I started practicing and I started getting better, and my whole perspective changed on what I can be as a turntablist. The same thing that back then happened in a matter of a few months after I won the Vect battle and had a session with him happened again after a 2-hour Skype session. Because he just literally broke down everything I did, which I guess I didn't have the theoretical understanding to say what it is. And he broke down what I could do better and where is it going and how this technique and this technique are the same in terms of fader movement, or how these patterns and that patterns. He just broke it all down for me and was being very positive the whole time. And I was just absolutely mind blown. It's almost like I caught up on several years of not understanding things within one session. That was the feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I used to, because, going early sort of mid-2000s, talking to him on the message boards, I think he was quite early on breaking sets down in that quite analytical way. I mean, he used to do these like little reports for people when they'd post up routines and stuff, and he'd be really blunt and it'd never be unfair, in my opinion. It'd never be unfair feedback, but sometimes people really wouldn't like it. But yeah, he's always had that thing. So it's great. It's great to hear that Angelo and Vect have both kind of had these sort of big influences on you. So with the winning things, I think what's interesting is, I think back when it was all just vinyl and everyone was DJing hip hop and funk primarily, say through the 90s in the DMCs, winning a DMC competition, I think would tend to result in getting a load of bookings, getting an agent, things like that, as far as I'm aware. But I think as we got into the kind of bedroom turntablist era in the mid to late 2000s, because, and this comes back to my comment previously, because of the sonics, the musicality, the custom pressings that people were using for routines and stuff, I think it stopped being a given that you could win the comp and then just get a load of bookings at a load of clubs. Did you find with your style it was quite easy to leverage that into getting bookings and touring and stuff?
Not at all. But I think that the topic that you're mentioning, the way you frame it, is very interesting. And I think there's numerous different factors. It would vary from country to country, especially from continent to continent, meaning North America and other places. And I'm just saying this right now because I wish to hear more people speak exactly about that, because I surely wouldn't be able to speak enough about it. I haven't been around for that long. There's surely things about career and industry that I don't understand, but I can tell you from my own experience, I think that as far as the hip-hop community is concerned, it's almost a negative if you're into turntablism. Because nowadays, to win, you have to nerd deeply in your real-time and double-time patterns and 3-clicks and whatnot, and they don't like that. Older generation hip-hop people, like new generation MCs, they don't even understand the idea of having a DJ. But older generation people who maybe run events and stuff, they're either not interested in turntablism at all, or they actively hate it. This is my feeling. There's certainly the general internet following and the reputation that, okay, even if I don't know much, then this guy must be good if he's winning, and then winning again. But as far as this resulting in any actual career changes, none at all. None at all. I've received 0 invites thanks to world titles. And I've tried to make it into something with the limited knowledge that I have for how to do career steps, which maybe right now is a bit more than it was in 2021. But it made me happy that it results in me somehow and suddenly being somebody internationally on that particular scene. It resulted in eyes being turned my direction and me being happy that I represent the turntablism with the aesthetic that I would want to hear it from other people as a human being with personal preferences for music and for turntablism in particular. But as far as career stuff, so I won 2020 Cut to Cut in pandemic and 2021 DMT Foundation in pandemic. And nobody in Austria still knew that I'm even in Austria. And I was saying I represent Austria and Bulgaria because I'm there. And I was linked up with the local Scratch community that consists of 4 people. And they were very happy about me. And that's about it.
So, and you're in Kuala Lumpur now, aren't you? Was that like a career move that took you and your partner there then?
Not really. I feel like lots of different things, man. And some of them just maybe not interesting in the context of this conversation. Some of them a bit personal, but we had this idea of trying out a new spot, and again outside of Europe, being a bit adventurous and taking advantage that, you know, we're in our 20s and life is there to be lived, you know what I mean, and enjoyed, and the world is to be experienced. But particularly Kuala Lumpur is where my girlfriend found a job with a local startup. And I did not do too much background research on what the place is like. And I just thought that it will be yet another place to try to run stuff and see what's happening. And I was hopeful. I was hopeful and positive. I was trying to ignore the previous experience, for example, of what happened in Sofia in 2018. And I was coming with open mind and heart, but also hopes that now with a couple of world titles and a good portfolio, I got the mixes, I got the guest mixes, I got the vids, I got the internet following, it would result in me trying to do pretty much the same stuff. Not trying to be internationally touring, highly paid DJ, because nobody who likes the music I am is that now. Literally nobody. Maybe Coco. I can only think of Coco when I think of hip-hop soul funk guy who has something that can be called a real career in the music industry and tours internationally. My idea was, if I can do what I tried to do in Sofia, but successfully, that would be great. I want to do some local stuff, do small underground gigs in neighboring countries, link up with local communities. That's it, pretty much. But the experience so far has been rather similar to what happened in Sofia back in 2018-19. And this time it's even heavier because I went to live battles. DMC was super heavy to me psychologically. Going into Poland, and we can talk about these battles and what happened there. In Poland at IDA, I win the show category, and now I've proven that I do this stuff live. And I won the category with the music that I created with my producer homie from Bulgaria. So I have a show with my own music now. I have an 045 show. I have a purely hardcore scratch show. I have the party set on Serato. And it's a word title in a live battle. Like, there's no more to prove. Maybe the next step only would be to win the DMC final. But there are no further steps as far as competitive DJing is concerned. And it still means nothing to anybody around here, except for a few hip-hop heads who have either given up on their careers or they struggle to do small gigs for 30, 40 people in living room-sized bars. That's what it is.
And this is kind of where we came to then, isn't it? This is kind of where we touched base last week, was around you announcing that you're retiring and purely just kind of bedroom recreational DJ, right?
Yeah. That's where we're at. So to just describe what January looked like to me, So last year, obviously, I had to travel to the States for the DMC finals, from here to San Fran. From there, I flew to Sofia, continued the battle prep in order to battle in IDA, did the IDA battle, had one gig for which I was invited to do a showcase the week after, practiced for that, did the gig, and 2 days later, I came back to Kuala Lumpur, took a little break, finally, around Christmas, New Year's Eve, and came back with the plan to work, to reap the benefits of a title, right? But also to just, again, try to be seen and heard around here locally. One plan was to expand a bit more on having tutorials online about scratching and turntablism and teaching online. And the other step was that I wanted to take it back to the roots with real vinyl, and I have a decent collection of 45s now. I brought my 45s from Bulgaria with the last flight coming in here. And I had another conversation with Vect. I hope he doesn't mind me talking about this, but again, he was very encouraging and hopeful. On a Skype call we jumped on, and he was saying that something I knew, which is that a title does nothing for you, but you can do stuff with that title. And I should, and I'd be surprised that people would just want to put me on a flyer just to have the world champ, the current world champ on their flyer. There would be people who love what I do and will book me. And also there will be people who never want to book me, and I'll have rejection as well. But that generally, there is stuff to be taken advantage of, and that I should totally go for it, 100%. And he gave me some particular tips about that, and we discussed some particular gig experiences that we've had, both me and him. And I started plotting it. I started making a list of places, from posh vinyl bars where I can play disco and disco funk, to places where I would rock a straight up b-boy set, to like just a place where I can do more of a little bit of scratching, little bit of just mixing party tunes and some hip hop in it. And I spent January planning these tutorials, making notes, thinking about the whole teaching tutorial series, looking up info on how to improve my setup, thinking about potentially streaming again, working on refreshing my website, and thinking about the web shop and the merch I have for sale. And at the same time already compiling different kinds of sets with these 45s I have, practicing on 45s, making sure I'm sharp on 45s as well, and making a whole list of these spots, starting to message people who might hook me up with people, or starting to just email or message these spots. And also at the same time shooting vids with the battle routines that I didn't have online, because I wanted to get rid of that. I wanted to just kind of say this is the finished episode, but I prepared this battle material and I'm sharing it with you, and the next chapter begins from then on. Meanwhile, also I was doing these sample reconstructions on Serato, so I was uploading a video on Instagram almost every day with some sample reconstructions of hip-hop from 3 different decades that I like a lot. And then the date is January 26th, and this is maybe how the making of the decision started. Might be a slightly childish moment, but I scrolled through Instagram on a super tired day, decided to just stare at nothing on my phone. And I'm going on Instagram and I'm not scrolling my own feed, but the recommended feed. And I literally see 10 posts in a row about DJing that piss me off beyond belief. And one of them was a huge platform which had 10 slides of advice how to blow up as a DJ in 2024. And I might be reading it wrong, but what I read was basically be business-minded, be complicit, play it cool, do what is expected from you, stay professional by understanding your crowd and what crowd you're catering to, and cater to your crowd. I was like, damn. And then I see that about 100 of my followers have put a like on that post, and what the fuck, fam? You know what I mean? This is knowing how to do a career and not seem as a hater has nothing to do with just being a music provider who fully caters to what can sell. These are two different things. And some people can say that this is sort of anti-career move or maybe even childish, but that will not change for me. These are two different things.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting with that is that, I mean, this is almost part of why I started the podcast, is the word DJ means so many different things to so many different people. A DJ can be someone who's a selector, a turntablist, they can be an artist, they can be an open format DJ, they can be a club DJ. For some people, it's about the performance and them being up on stage. For other people, it's about the music doing the talking. And so maybe for the people that it's about being a performer on stage or being an entertainer in a certain way, those types of pieces of advice are probably quite in line for someone who wants that to be their career. But if you want to be doing your thing, creating, building that community, playing X, Y, and Z, it's a totally different thing. And so I got to a point when I was DJing in, say, the late 2000s, maybe around 2010, when I would go and do bar sets, I was playing the same things. I was playing things that I wanted, that I liked, but I wasn't playing everything I liked. I was playing the things that I liked that I knew I could get away with playing. It was probably being a very different DJ to what I wanted to be at the time. So like now, and at one point I kind of stopped DJing, sold all my records, and then kind of picked it up again around the time that I started doing this. And I do a lot less gigs, but the ones I do, I tend to be kind of playing what I want to play. And for me, it's a balance of that with what the rest of my world is, my job, my family. You know, DJing's not everything. DJing's a smaller thing, but it's the right type of DJing. And I guess that's, do you know how DJing how your needs can be met as a DJ now? Like, can you be happy with DJing being just kind of at home doing videos online, do you think?
I won't be even doing videos, but to go back to your point, I very clearly understand that DJing is quite a few different things, but the reason I want people to link the story that I told thus far to why I was on a very tired day, again, for the 5th year in a row, trying to do a whole lot of stuff, which is going nowhere. And I'll get to the point why I was going nowhere, but why I would sit down on Instagram and be pissed off by something like this is that if you're in the States, there's absolutely no issues for these things to coexist. And also in the States, I get that there's a much stronger idea of community exactly because of that. Because people understand that they're doing different things. And club DJs with crowd control skills and maybe not a lot of performance skills, respect performance skills and vice versa. And I know especially in some cities with long traditions in DJing in particular, these different cats are cool with each other and they do help each other. But if you look at a place like Kuala Lumpur, the mindset that this post is describing is the reason why people like me can't do anything. And it's literally anything. Because there is no room for anybody to show a crowd that there is something different. And it's a downward spiral from there because everybody makes that career decision. All the ex-Malaysian DMC champs, which are not all that at all, technically and creatively, are doing pop DJing or EDM DJing. And they inspire the next generation of people to do exactly that. And it goes on and on and on. And the crowd sees that. And there's not enough diversity because there isn't enough job opportunities in industry and culture in general to allow for all these things to coexist. So I think it's similar in Sofia. The more people who have the mindset to make their hobby, their passion, or just their side hustle into a well-paid thing are following this kind of mindset, the more they're taking the only opportunities that are out there. And they're educating this crowd at partying is about that. And they're dictating a narrative where what I do is redundant That's my feeling. It really is. And this is very different from LA or London or Manchester, or because probably there are EDM DJs in Manchester. I don't know, although Manchester has such a tradition in so many things, but just a random example. I'm sure that there are some people pissed off at some DJs doing blah blah in Manchester, but there's plenty of other stuff going on in cultural centers in Europe and the States like that.
Yeah, it's hard stuff. I'm sure I read a tweet not too long back where DJ Yoda had a drink spat on him by someone. Yeah, I can't remember where that was, but it wouldn't surprise me necessarily if it was in London. There's still things everywhere. I mean, I was reading Fat Tony's book, and he was talking about, I think it was one of the gay nights in London that went on to become legendary, super important night in the 90s, that when they first started that, there was like 4 or 5 people there. So I have similar thoughts around these sorts of things, because I like the thought of starting things in my city, but even though I'm in the UK, I think where I am, it's probably quite hard to find those people with that mindset. So it's like, how is there a way to do something that's like a micro community, where I think the benefit of having a job is you can do something and you can donate your time for free to it and then just see if it picks up or not. It's quite kind of low risk. But I mean, obviously you've donated a lot of time to doing these things before.
And again, I would still, sorry to interrupt, but I would still donate the time. Not now, because now my decision is final, but up until then, I was still happy to almost donate the time if someone says, hey, run this regular night. Let's see if you can build this up. I'll trust upon you to try to build this up. Do what you do. I never had that. And that's why on the Instagram comments under my post, I told you that your podcast also influenced my decision, because I was listening to the stories of some of the people that you had on the podcast. And I felt like in the places where they grew up or where they were doing what they do, they had at least this one crucial moment where someone saw what they're doing and gave them a hand and said, okay, do it, just go and do it. But I never had that. And that's also the thing about like scale in a way, because obviously I'm not expecting to pack a 1,000 people club by playing breaks and funk. You know what I mean? But if I play in front of 30 people and 25 of them come personally to me to say that this is their favorite night this year thus far, then it got to be a way for these 30 people to be 100. And then I need a place that can house these 100 people, because last Saturday, my last gig here, I played in front of 30 people in a place that has a maximum of 50 people capacity. But Kuala Lumpur doesn't even have a place that can take 100 people and runs alternative events. Like the total amount of zero. And Sofia is not that bad, but I think it's slowly getting there.
I really, really appreciate you talking through all this with me. I think your background's fascinating, and it's kind of hard to hear in certain ways, because you've obviously got so much passion for this, and you've tried so many things, and you're so talented, and these things just haven't all aligned for you. I sincerely hope that energy that you were putting into these things, you can find a different way to port that kind of you can get a return on that investment from, of that time and that energy. Yeah. So, is there anything else that we've not covered that you'd like to mention to any of the listeners?
I guess if there's anybody who is listening to this and hasn't checked my stuff out, check my stuff out. It's out there. YouTube channel, Instagram. Yeah. My website is up and running, so that's where you find like the shortened version of the most important stuff I've done. And yeah, as I said, also on social media, the only DJ activity that I'll keep on doing is teach scratching online. I've been helping my buddies in Sofia with cuts. I've been doing workshops, and occasionally I've been also teaching, and I can still do that, and I'm still interested in doing that. And I find it fun to break stuff down for people. So that's the only public DJ DelightFull that exists right now. So if you're interested in that...
Yeah, but it's DelightFull with 2 L's.
Oh yeah, DJDelightFull2Ls.com, and you find the info there.
Yeah, and we'll put links in the show notes. Yeah, thanks again for sharing your story with us. And if anything does change in the future or you've got any updates, don't hesitate to give me a shout.
Sure, and thanks for having me.
Anytime. Thanks a lot, man. Take care. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Once a DJ. If you'd like to support the show, then head to onceadj.com/support to find out how you can help. If you'd like to get in touch with any feedback or suggestions, email onceadjpodcast@gmail.com. Once a DJ is produced by the good people at Remote Control. If you'd like to find out more about working with them, head to remote-ctrl.co.uk.